Hello class, today we are starting a new book to go along with our Bookworms workbook. The book's name is Animal Cells and Life Processes. If you haven't found it already, you will find this book in our classroom on the bottom shelf. Remember, our classroom, you can find that under the tab Classwork in our Google Classroom, and then it's the first item listed under Our Resources. Okay, so we are using a nonfiction text to learn about cells. So we can turn to the table of contents to see how the entire book is organized. Notice all of the chapter titles are questions. So we see, what is a cell? What are the parts of an animal cell? How do cells take in and use food? And so on. You can also see that there's a glossary. Remember, in a glossary is where you find the definitions to any of the bold-faced words that we come across. There's also a section where it gives you a chance to find out more. So that's going to list places where you can find more information about animal cells, and we'll also have an index at the very end of the book where you can look up things in this book by topic. Now the glossary, find out more, and index, you will find that all in the section that says day 7 on yours. So if you ever need that, you can click on day 7 to look that up. We are going to be reading the first chapter today, but it will be helpful if you look at it before we read. So what text features did the author choose to include? When you read a nonfiction text, you have to make some choices about the order that you'll use. I tend to think it's best to read the running text first for 2 pages, so that's the kind of the normal text, if you will. And then go back and read any boxes and captions before going to the next page. So we'll end up reading 2 pages, and then we'll look back, pictures, captions, and then we'll continue reading from there. All right, let's go ahead and get started then. We're on page 4, where it says, what is a cell? Please read aloud with me, just like you would if we were in class. It's good practice for you, especially when there's bigger words, when we're looking at a sciencey type text. It just gives you practice learning those words when you can hear yourself say them out loud. All right, let's get started. You cut your finger and a single drop of blood falls. You have just lost millions of cells. Millions of cells? I think we can make an inference here. I know a single drop of blood is pretty tiny. The text says that the drop contains millions of cells. So we can figure out that cells must be very, very tiny. So cells are the basic units of all living things. Wow, that sounds like a definition. From a blue whale down to a one-celled protozoa, animals are made up of individual microscopic cells. So what does microscopic mean? You know what a microscope is, so what does it mean to say that a cell is microscopic? Everything comes down to the basic unit of life, the cell. Like all other living things, we are nothing more than a bunch of cells. It is how those cells are arranged and what those cells do that makes the difference between different plants and animals. What do cells do? In every animal, old cells die and new cells form. Animal bodies are constantly at work. They replace worn-out cells. They make new cells, and every cell has a specific job. Cell work is responsible for all the life processes that keep animals alive and healthy. How many cells? As animals grow, the number of cells in their bodies increases. The total number of cells in an animal is tremendous, more than anyone could count. Scientists estimate that adult humans have between 50 trillion and 100 trillion cells. A trillion is a million. An adult has many more cells than a small child. Why is that? Why would an adult have to have more cells than a small child? All right, let's go back and look at the caption. So we see up here, we have a picture of a thumb with a prick of blood. It says this single drop of blood contains millions of cells. And it looks like we have a scientist spotlight here. Robert Hooke. I wonder if this scientist's name would end up being a who on one of our Bookworms pages. So read along with me. Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke, 1635 to 1703, was one of England's greatest scientists. His natural curiosity led him to study everything from plants to rocks to stars to geology. He even studied the workings of mechanical toys and ships. His best-known contribution may have been his book Micrographia, 1665. In this book, Hooke drew accurate illustrations of organisms, or living things, that he saw through a microscope. Hooke described his view of thin slices of cork in Micrographia. The pores of it were not regular. These pores, or cells, were indeed the first microscopical pores I ever saw. Hooke had discovered plant cells, and we have called these units cells since then. It says Robert Hooke was the first scientist to use the word cell to mean the basic unit of life. His book, Micrographia, features this close-up image of a dronefly. And it looks like these are probably his eyes right here. And this is likely kind of the top of his head, and then he's got kind of the mouth sticking up here. So where did it say that Robert Hooke first saw cells? And why is it that he got to name them? What basic concepts explain cells? Scientists who study cells know 3 truths about animals and plants. These facts make up a theory or idea about cells. 1. Every living thing is made up of 1 or more cells. 2. The cell is the smallest unit of life. 3. All life can be traced to the growth and division of cells. It is difficult to think that you have much in common with a dandelion or a pine tree, but you do. Looking at human and plant cells shows us that we are not that different from plants. We have skin cells that form an outer layer around our bodies. Plants also have cells that form protective skin. Human and plant cells use food for energy, and they also produce waste. In order to grow, our cells reproduce, make a copy. To carry on a species, group of living things of the same type, plants and animals create offspring. So look at the bold-faced words on this page. Each one is followed by information in parentheses. What does that mean? What is the information that's in parentheses? What is it for? And here is a view through a microscope showing millions of cells. And let's take a look. Science tools, the compound microscope. In 1590, Dutch eyeglass maker Hans Janssen and his son Zacharias put together 2 magnifying lenses in a tube. They made the first compound microscope. This simple tool opened up the microscopic world to science. Today's microscopes work like the Janssen's microscope, but are much more powerful. They have an upper lens at the eyepiece and lenses below. The total magnification equals the power of the eyepiece lens, 10 times, multiplied by the power of the lower lens, which can be, for example, 4 times, 10 times, 40 times, or 100 times. For example, using the 100 times lower lens and the 10 times eyepiece would magnify an object 1,000 times. So they got that by multiplying 100 times 10. This kind of power lets scientists see inside individual cells. It says today's microscopes are powerful enough to see not just cells, but also the parts of cells. Okay, that is the end of our section for today. So let's go ahead and look at the work that we'll need to go with this in our workbook. You already know how to do super sentences. I know you're familiar with those, but let's go over the words. So our first word is cells, and we see cells several times in this short amount of reading. So you can choose which way you decide to use it, as long as it connects in some way back to the book. So it says cells is a noun that means the smallest unit of life. All living things are made up of cells. The adjective form is cellular. So again, you're going to put the cells in the middle here, and then you're trying to figure out who, what, where, when, why, and how. As you process this, just keep in mind that you're only required to have 3 of these. If you can do more than that, that's great, but the requirement is to have 3 of the outside bubbles in your sentence, and then use that vocabulary word in your sentence. On this one, I'll give you a hint. Some of the kids in class decided for the who, they would use the name Robert Hooke because they knew that he was the one that was discovered plant cells, so they thought they might use it that way. So you'll fill in your bubbles, complete your super sentence. This word nucleus, we did not find this in this chapter, so we feel like this was put in the wrong place. To figure out this word, you will actually have to go to day 2 in our book, and you should be able to find it and work with it there. And again, you just need at least 3 bubbles and your vocabulary word for this sentence. If you go down to the written response, on our written response, it says to take notes for the chapter, but it's going to give us a very specific way to take notes. When we study something new, it is helpful to write a summary or information in your own words. Write each question in the chapter subheadings, and then write a short answer that will help you to remember the information. Reread, but then use your own words. So what they're saying is each one of these sections had a subheading. So if we go back up, I had a question in it. So there was 4 questions. One question is, what is a cell? So on my paper, I would write, what is a cell? And then I would find the answer for it. So on this one, I'm going to help you with the answer. The rest you'll have to come up with. So as I read through, I'm looking for something that tells me what a cell is. And I can get to this part here. It says cells are the basic units of all living things. I can also continue reading and see something like this. It comes down to the basic unit of life, the cell. So the cell is the basic unit of life. So I would go back here. After the part where I wrote my question, I would give the answer. And I would say, it is the basic unit of life. Okay, you're going to do that for each one of those questions. So you're going to be answering, what is a cell? Make sure you write the question down. You're going to be answering, what do cells do? Again, please make sure you write the question and then write the answer. You'll be writing down the question, how many cells, and then after where you've written the question, you will find the answer and put that in. Then the last one that you'll write down is what basic concepts explain cells. So I should see this question on your paper, and then you will go on to tell what basic concepts explain cells. At that point, you will be finished and you may turn it in.